Hey, what's going on guys, Khraze here and welcome back to another Outriders video. Today let's talk about the best legendary farm right now in the new update, especially since some of the changes in the new update have made many of the enemies to deal way too much damage even after applying a lot of damage mitigation, as I've talked about in yesterday's video. So right now there are a few changes here and there that you need to make in order to make the most out of your farms and get back on track with the farming, especially of those legendaries. So let's jump right into it. Right off the bat, I want to make a couple of things clear, and that is the fact that despite having emergency stands fixed, there might still be another problem on top when it comes to endgame builds and their viability right now in CT15. And it's not just solely relying on the fact that you're lacking defenses, it also seems, at least at the first glance, that enemy damage has been scaled up severely across the board. And I've actually played around with this one. Again, I haven't yet fully finalized anything, but even when going with way more resistance and armor than what was given by emergency stance, I'm still getting killed way faster and way easier than the previous update, and I'm seeing similar reports by other players. Specifically, there's been a few of the builds in the game that were so affected by the new changes that they might no longer be viable, especially in CT15s. We're going to talk about some potential workarounds, and a few of them are still faring well, which is why I will split this video into two parts. So starting right off the bat, a few of the classes and builds are still faring relatively well in CT15. Specifically, the Technomancer firepower build is still going to go really well into high-end expeditions because essentially enemies don't really get close to you until you get them down. Also, Devastators are now probably one of the best classes to play with because you have super high survivability, and especially with the anomaly build you can take everything down and not have to worry about getting one-shotted. Trickster is kind of in between. I'm having like pretty good success with it, but Pyromancer is by far the weakest. It was already pretty bad because you really need perfect sets, perfect rolls, and perfect mod distribution to make the build work. It was the same in the previous update, but now it's a little bit worse. And I'm completely locked out of CT15 in most expeditions with a Pyromancer. So for the classes that are not that affected by this change, especially the Devastator and the Technomancer, Archways of Enoch and Campland on CT15, you can go ahead and do them. If you were able to do these normally previously, complete them with a good timer, chances are that with just a couple of mod shifts here and there, you're going to be able to completely do them as well in the new update. You just have to be careful a little bit more with the positioning against enemies, and especially with the Technomancer, to maybe keep your distance. Now, depending which ones of these you go against the most, like for example Campland instead of Archways of Enoch, you might want to favor a certain defensive stat and as a result use a different mod depending on this. So if you, for example, go up against enemies that exclusively deal physical damage, in this case that would be most of the enemies in the Campland with the exception of some of the bosses that can spawn some random spells, in that case mitigation from death and maybe some damage absorber if you can hit the cap could help you quite a little bit, but mitigation from death should be enough in these situations. Now, as I've said yesterday, if you go against enemies that tend to cast spells, in this case that would be Archways of Enoch, because enemies do actually do spell damage when they do the leap, and the area of effect damage, which is the highest of their damage, is going to affect you by spell damage. In that situation you will want to go with a Circle of Power in case you don't have anything else. This one is going to raise you all the way up to 45%. Now, if you are running with classes and you benefit from a tier 1 that can give you some really nice resistance, like Ember Shield for Pyromancer, you can get like 50% resistance with this one when using overheat. You can also replace it with something like this. You're going to want to use resistance in that case, since as I've said, resistance is the one going up against anomaly attacks and status effects coming in from enemies. Now, this is of course for the Devastator, for the Technomancer, and in some situations for the Trickster as well. But for other builds that were not meta before, and even more so for the Pyromancer, then my suggestion is to actually turn off your challenge tier to a lower level. Now there's two options that you can choose from whenever you can't do CT15, and these are going to be by setting that challenge tier to 13 or to 14, and I will explain why you should choose either the one or the other depending on your choice. First of all, starting from the patch notes, now the enemy scaling can go up to a maximum of 3 level difference between you and your enemies, which means that 14 and 13, which are only 1 and 2 levels below you, are now scaling better than they were previously, and it means that they might be way easier for you to complete and still get a decent chance at legendaries. So let me give you an example. If you can already semi-do 15 and challenge tier 15 and are struggling in the very last room, for example, like maybe you get downed by a boss or every other run is a failure, then in this situation I recommend going down to challenge tier 14. The difference in legendary drops is minimal. It's only about 5%, from 25% on CT15 to 20% in CT14, so you're not really losing that much. The biggest disadvantage is the fact that you're losing a little bit on that drop pod resources, more than half of them basically, but if you were already playing with that class, or if you already had a main that had like the maximum drop pod resources in the previous update, then you don't really have to worry too much about that. And from that point on, you can upgrade said legendaries or epics or even like the blues to level 50 and try to get better with the build. Now, if on the other hand CT15 is completely inaccessible to you and even CT14 proves to be unreliable, then I would recommend to go another level below that and set it to 13, and this would be the maximum lowest I would handle right now, because anything from this point on is too low in legendary drops. If you look at the legendary drops, it's only 15% and it goes down by 5% every single time. When you reach like 12, it's going to be very low, beneath 10%, so I would not go any lower than that. Now this is going to also help you a little bit more because you're trading off legendary drop chance, but you're winning tremendously in completion time. So this is basically what I've been doing all day. I've been playing between 13 and 14, testing things out. Right now for the Pyromancer, it more than handles 14, even with a set that doesn't even have like the full Akari set, so it works really well right now. But again, you can also tune it down all the way to 13 because you're completing it that much faster. It doesn't mean that a character has to struggle in 15 or 14 to go down to 13. You can also go with like one of your best characters because you're going to compensate with that completion time right there. Now, I'm seeing a lot of people saying that for some reason there are some bugs in the game that you can get more like legendaries in the lower challenge tiers, which is honestly just, yeah, not true. It's all RNG. You can go in and have a streak of luck, get 3 legendaries, 2 legendaries, even up to 4 legendaries, it happened to me, and get them back to back, but it's just a matter of RNG. There's nothing else in there, nothing more, nothing less. That's pretty much it. But this is it with the new update. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.